Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fourth webinar for grades 6 through 12 teachers in our 2021-2022 webinar series, focusing on building student literacy skills. I'm Keisha Gu. I'm the head of education for the Getty Museum, and I will be your host this afternoon. Today, we're going to be focusing on strategies for middle and high school grades that will help students build their self-expression skills. We're sharing activities that use very simple materials and also include ways that you can incorporate photography into your teaching. Our goal is that you'll be inspired to try some of these strategies, that you'll find them very easy to use, whether you're a core subject teacher or whether or not you're a visual arts teacher. Additionally, we'll be sharing a lot of teacher resources from our award-winning Getty Unshuttered program, including video and lesson plans for you. So our presenters today include young artist Jeremy Davis, along with 3 Getty Education staff members, Rebecca Edwards, Brittany Prieto, and Darcy Beeman Black. Rebecca is going to get us started with some general thoughts about student expression and related curriculum standards. Brittany is going to follow with an overview of Getty Unshuttered and the online resources and videos and lesson plans, and how you can include those photography assets into your classroom. After that, we're going to hear from Darcy. Darcy will be sharing self-expression activities that you can do in your classroom. And then, like I mentioned before, at the end, we'll wrap up with a live Q&A. But before we get started, I'd like to set the stage with a short video that highlights the importance of encouraging young people for their self-expression via the arts and via photography. So we've invited young artist Jeremy Davis to share a little bit about his artistic journey and what's inspired him along the way.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Davis. I'm a 22-year-old artist from South Central Los Angeles. I go to the University of Southern California, and I'm currently a junior, earning a bachelor's degree in cinema and media studies, as well as photography. Today, I will be sharing my journey as a photographer, artist, and college student. Although I'm earning a 4-year degree in film and photography, art has not always been a major part of my identity. Similar to a lot of young people in Los Angeles who grew up idolizing Kobe Bryant, I surely thought I was destined for the NBA if I worked hard enough. However, there comes a time when you have to assess the situation and weigh all the possibilities. That moment came after 13 years of competitive basketball during my junior year of high school. I was not the tallest or the best shooter or even the most athletic on the basketball court. So I realized the likelihood of me playing basketball at the college level was not very high. This realization freed time for me to open new doors and pursue new endeavors. One of those endeavors was photography. Luckily for me, I had a teacher, Miss Grau, who took a liking to me during her Photography 1 class. Miss Grau made my learning curve for photography less steep. What made Miss Grau's class and her teaching style so beneficial was she encouraged me to see the world in bits and pieces of whatever caught my eye. I remember her literally telling me, "Jeremy, just take photos of whatever you think is interesting, whatever makes you happy or whatever makes you sad. There's no wrong way to take photography." As I took more photos, my skills gradually progressed and my eye began to train itself on what makes a compelling image. As teachers, you know students excel with repetition and practice. That is the key. Practice the art of photography while also having fun. That is how your students will initially learn to see the world through their lens. Here are a few examples of portraits that I took during AP Studio Art Photography that I used at the end of the semester art show. I do photography to share who I am, the beauty that I see every day, and the struggle that my people experience. Photography helps to create agency for me. For example, my beauty standards are different than the beauty standards that you see in mainstream media. That is because I have beautiful women all around me, such as my mom, my aunts, and my grandmothers, all of whom are different shades of brown. Although this might not always be represented in the mainstream media, this is what I see every day, and this is what I view as beautiful. I use my artistic liberty to capture and share people from my community with the world at large. It's the same for men in my family. When I think of wisdom, as well as people with high character and high integrity, I see men from my community as well as men from my family. Shan Wallace, the teaching artist that I worked with closely, would always insist and remind me to remain purposeful and intentional about what is in my frame when I'm taking photos. She constantly reminded me to never cut off the corners of images because they will often contain information that is important to telling the full story in your photos. For example, in this photo right here, if I would have zoomed in and only focused on this kid and his mother, I would have missed the father in the background smiling at both of them after his son received his haircut and is hugging his mom. This photo of Shan Wallace herself is a great example of how her critique helped me during my time with Getty Unshuttered. In this photo, you can see the flowers frame her face on all three sides. By framing her face, the leaves help create a more compelling image because they keep your eye moving around the photo and help you to not only concentrate on her head. My future professional goal is to work as a photographer or camera operator for movies and commercials, or create campaigns for branding for a number of companies. As teachers, I know most of you have seen and used books with images to teach students any number of subjects. Another long-term goal of mine is to write a book with images that can tell the stories of people from my community. I know my journey in photography has been relatively new, but I'm confident that the lessons that I've learned, as well as the people that I've met along my journey in photography, will help me pursue my future endeavors, as well as my future goals in photography, as well as film. I'm confident the lessons that I've learned from Getty Unshuttered will help me achieve those goals as well. Lastly, I will leave you guys with photos that I've taken over the past 3 years during my time at USC.
Those are beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Jeremy was a participant in our Getty Unshuttered program. It was an photography intensive for youth in 2019. And he came to us as an amazing, emerging, thoughtful photographer then. And he's only grown since that participation that he had in Getty Unshuttered. And so he's so incredibly technically accomplished. His work was exhibited at the Getty Museum in 2019, along with other fellow participants. And we have just been delighted to follow Jeremy along his journey as he's entered USC and continues to grow in his art and in his craft. So we're grateful to have him with us here today. He'll be joining us later in the Q&A, so you can ask him any questions that you have about his practice or his studies at the end of the webinar. So now we're going to turn to one of our Getty educators, Rebecca Edwards. Rebecca Edwards is one of our education specialists, and she is going to get us started with a little bit of an overview and some related curriculum information. Rebecca?
Great. Thank you, Keisha, for that introduction. So hopefully with the opportunity to hear from Jeremy, everybody's feeling inspired and ready to encourage your students to explore their own self-expression, whether it's through photography or other art forms. So we'll be moving forward with outlining for you some strategies that you can use and some tools that we can share for you to explore this in your own teaching. So getting us started, for those of you I see in the participant list, we have many people here with us today who have been with us for our other webinars this year. So to review the trajectory of this year's webinars, we're focusing on visual literacy, and we started by talking about how to read an image. We then progressed to talking about how to discuss an image in your classroom and how to support students in building their own skills to talk about art. We then talked about how to delve deeper and learn more about a work of art and how to support students in their own research to help them figure out more about what they've already interpreted and looked at and discussed. So we're taking it to the next level with this webinar and focusing on those visual literacy skills that students have acquired by learning to read an image, talk about it, and research it, to then take what they've learned from those works of art and apply it to their own creative process. So today we're really focusing on how to help students take that visual literacy to the next level and use their skills to express themselves. So why do we think that creative self-expression is valuable for students? Well, it's a great way of communicating that's different from all of the other methods that you're usually doing in your classroom, such as reading and writing and discussion. It's another way of communicating that students don't always get to build on as much in their core curriculum. It creates an opportunity to reflect on how they're feeling, to look for ways to communicate big ideas, and to understand their peers and build empathy and relationships by discussing with their peers what their peers have made, what it expresses. There's also a great problem-solving component to creating any work of art, in that there are the limitations of the materials that a student or any artist might be working with, and figuring out how to leverage the limitations and advantages of a particular medium to express what it is that they're going for. It's also a great way to enrich what students are already learning. In addition to writing about it or discussing it, they can also express their learning through visual means. So as you're likely aware, there are several core standards across both English language arts and the visual arts and the VAPA standards that come into play when you're thinking about doing self-expression activities for students in your classroom. I've shared a couple of them here. Additionally, we've pulled together some of the anchor standards in the National Core Art Standards, which focus on the creating set of standards and the connecting set of standards. So, and then last but not least, we'd like to get an idea of those of you who are here today, to get a sense of the access that you have in your classroom with cameras, where we want to share several photography approaches that you can use, but we're also making sure to share creative strategies that don't require cameras. So for students or teachers who have less access to cameras, we still have things to share with you today that we hope you'll find helpful. So let's go ahead and launch the poll. Okay, so let's go ahead and end the poll and share with you. So it looks like there is pretty good access to cameras in your classrooms for 78% of you. And then for 22% of you, there's rare but some access. So hopefully many of you will be able to use the photography-based strategies that we're going to share today. And for those of you for whom that's a little bit more tricky, we'll have things to share with you that you can do without cameras. Okay, so I'd like to go ahead and transition and invite my colleague, Brittany Prieto, to the screen. And she is the education specialist for youth development programs at the Getty in our education department. and she has been overseeing our Unshuttered photography program. So she's the perfect person to have here at the webinar with us today to share with us some of those resources and videos and lessons that you can find online. So I'll go ahead and turn over the screen to you, Brittany.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. I'm so happy to be here with you all today. Again, my name is Brittany Prieto, and I'm the Education Specialist for Youth Development Programs. And along with my colleagues, Alice Dew and Joshua Ramirez, we oversee and do the teen programs here at the Getty. In that constellation of teen programs, one of the programs we offer is the Unshuttered program, which is now in its 4th iteration since beginning back in 2018. And as we heard, which Jeremy was part of in 2019. Unshuttered has taken many different forms over the years. It has been an on-site photography program and intensive. It is a photo sharing and skill building app. It encompasses a website for teachers and educators, which we'll look at together. And most recently, in the last 2 years, it has been the kind of catalyst for a nationwide photography open call for young people. And that open call will result in an exhibition that will be up at the Getty this summer, which we're really looking forward to, and will be part of a kind of legacy now of Unshuttered, presenting the work of young teen photographers in exhibitions at the Getty. So throughout the years of Unshuttered and the projects that we've created and the programs we've done under this banner, we have documented the program and we've created digital resources for the program. And in doing that, we have worked to really make those available to anyone to use, but most expressly with 2 audiences in mind, with young people and teens in mind, and for educators and teachers. So you will see a number of these resources, videos, and other worksheets and the like in the webinar today, kind of sprinkled throughout what Darcy's going to share with us. And we wanted to start by just showing you all exactly how you can access this information and these resources on your own so that you can think about integrating it into your classroom. So I start here with the Getty Museum YouTube channel, which you can see is very, very robust. There's a lot here. There's a lot to look at. Among all these videos, we do have some Unshuttered resources. So in this featured playlist, which you can also access by clicking the playlist link at the top, we have this Unshuttered playlist here. Clicking that brings you to this page where you can see we provide about 25 videos. These are all only about 20 seconds long. They are very bite-sized, and I won't play one for you now, but we did want to show kind of the array of what these videos cover, from composition to extreme close-ups, medium to long shots, and perspectives. And the idea with these videos is that they offer a kind of jumping off point. They can be a video, a resource that you all take in and kind of have in your back pocket or back of mind as you start to introduce some of these concepts to your students. But they also have great potential for just sharing within the classroom setting or sharing links to your students so they can access them directly. The videos are here on the YouTube channel. We'll see them in the lesson plans that I'm going to move to. And again, we'll see them in some of the work that we look at together today with Darcy. So as well as the YouTube channel and the presence of Unshuttered there, we also have unshuttered.org. And this has really been a kind of home base for the resources of Unshuttered. On the home page here, you can see we reference the open call that just happened. This page is literally in the process of being updated as we're all here today, so it'll have some new information in here. But you see we reference the app, we reference lesson plans, and I'm going to just keep scrolling so we get another view of one of Jeremy Davis's photographs here. Up at the top of the page, we have a couple of links. One is for galleries where you can see work by some of the young photographers in our past years of Unshuttered. And we also have this link for educators. Clicking that link brings you to this page. And here we have 3 different lesson plan series. There's social justice advocacy and photography, which encompasses 8 lessons, visual narrative and photography with another 8 lessons, and then foundational photography skills. Clicking the link here for viewing the lessons, in this case, shows you the 5 foundational photography skills. skills lesson plans. And each one of these, we can look at perspective in this case, they all follow a very similar structure. They open with sharing kind of the objectives and outcomes of each lesson plan and the associated standards that are part of this plan in this case. They then move through a kind of sequence that is standard and uniform from one lesson plan to the next, moving into the instructional plan. And in this case, we here are seeing some of the unshuttered work, some photographs by unshuttered participants. Something I love about our unshuttered lesson plans is the fact that they offer us an opportunity to share even more widely the work of our unshuttered artists. And we're doing that alongside photography from the Getty collection. Having their work as part of these lesson plans, I think, can be really exciting for other young people to be able to dive into these conversations and these explorations while doing deep analysis and close looking at work by peers, really, by other young people. So moving down through this lesson plan, you see here we also integrate in explorations of Getty collection images. And then down at the bottom, you see we have resources here. And this includes downloadable PDFs that is everything from a download of the entire lesson plan to any worksheets that might be part of the plan in this case. And we also have links, again, back to some of those bite-sized unshuttered skills videos. And we have kind of curated the videos for each lesson plan that have the most relevance in each case. You'll see, obviously, this is a lot. Our lesson plans are definitely quite robust. We erred on the side of giving a lot more information. You all as educators and teachers are so attuned and adept at really distilling information down and customizing different resources for your classrooms. So we thought we would take an approach of giving a lot of information with the idea that each educator coming to this work can choose the elements of each lesson, and in fact, each lesson as they see fitting best into their classroom environment. With each of the different series, so here we have the social justice advocacy and photography series with 8 lesson plans here. We certainly envisioned them and worked on these lesson plans very holistically, envisioning someone working from the first lesson plan, in this case through the 8th, but we also made sure that each lesson was standalone. So you could come to these lesson plans and decide that you wanted to do an exploring your background and identity lesson and follow that up with a lesson on composition, for example. The idea is that really each of these can stand alone and be integrated into curriculum as you see fit. I'm going to scroll through this lesson as I just share that all of these different plans were done really in great collaboration between a number of people. Many of us within the education department at the Getty. We worked with colleagues in the Department of Photographs. We certainly worked with the artists who are part of our kind of unshuttered community, and we worked with outside education experts as well. So again, you see this work by one of our unshuttered artists, and scrolling further down, you'll see a work from our collection, both of which are really explored and analyzed here in depth with questions for discussion and information about the work as a little bit of background knowledge for the educators leading through the sessions. And then again, at the bottom, we have these resources, which includes worksheets and videos. And again, you're going to see these throughout the presentation that Darcy is going to do to follow here. And I just wanted to thank you for your time, for having me. And I will be here at the end along with my colleagues to answer any questions that may come up. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Darcy.
Thank you, Brittany. All right, so hello, everyone. So now that we've heard from Brittany about the lessons and videos and resources, I am going to go through a number of ideas for activities that you can do with your students that I have sort of pulled materials for, and these are sort of ones that you can just like pick up and go, where the ones that Brittany showed you have a lot of information you can dig and sort of curate your own experience yourself. I have actually put together some themes that I thought would be appropriate. So I'm going to share 3 themes for activities. So each one will have a few steps and multiple media options. I'm going to share questions, works for inspiration, and as well as student artwork. And then the 3 themes I will share are make a self-portrait, share something you believe in, and tell a story. So throughout the different themes, I've included multiple approaches and resources that you can utilize in your classroom for your specific situation and options to choose from to meet the needs of your particular situation. So I will share some of the skills videos from the page that Brittany shared, as well as share resources from lesson plans in the educator portal. And then some of these resources will include some of the student handouts that you saw, and some of the discussion questions also. So I have included some tips here for supporting self-expression in the classroom. I know we have teachers in here from all subject areas, so I thought it might be helpful to share some tips for supporting students through making art. So a big one is try to focus on process over product. So centering the students' ideas through the process of making and creating will make for a more enriching and meaningful experience. So try to stay away from like copy me approach or accurate depictions, because that will allow space for more authentic expressions. Another tip is to withhold judgment and allow for mistakes to be made, and I would say even try to embrace those mistakes. So something we see in students who are new to expressing themselves through art is that they are really hard on themselves. So supporting students through those happy accidents can actually open up new opportunities for not only empowering experiences through expression, but also with helping through any anxieties or discomfort that students may have while using some of the supplies or processes that we use in art. And then another tip is to ask thought-provoking questions that invite students to share their process and what they are thinking or trying to communicate. So combining discussion, creation, brainstorming, and planning will allow for students to shine in different skill areas. And then finally, offer choices. Choices in approach, choices in materials. Both of those can help to incorporate all of these tips naturally. So more choices lead to more authentic expressions and opportunities for students to engage in several ways. There is a way that I've generally structured these activities in the presentation today. And generally the activity starts with a prompt, and then that includes a series of questions and a work of art. And that's really designed to sort of kick off inspiration. And then we'll go through and consider ways to carry out that prompt that fits your situation and matches the resources that you have. I will also be sharing a variety of activities that don't use a camera. I know we've talked about photography a lot today so far, but we're also going to incorporate other materials like a pencil and paper. So the first prompt I'm sharing is make a self-portrait. So I think self-portraits offer the opportunity for students to self-reflect, understand themselves, and can help us and the student learn more about their values, interests, and beliefs. I will go through a few steps that you can do to make this activity as simple as you want it to be, as well as offer some extensions if so desired. But first, before I get into this, I also want to add one more tip. I want to call out the idea that sharing the work of peers is a way to embolden students to think about themselves as artists. So sometimes making art can feel intimidating and overwhelming, and we believe that sharing the work of other young artists that are the same age or in the same peer group can show students that they are able to make art without the pressure of emulating what they think of as like the professional artist. I will share art from students throughout the presentation, and I encourage you to think about this concept as you work with your students. Okay, so for step 1 in the self-portrait prompt, we can start by looking at self-portraits made by other artists. You could perhaps try some of the reading, discussing, and researching activities from previous webinars in this series, but I have included a few discussion questions here to help us jump right in. This self-portrait is a painting by French artist Charles-Antoine Coipel, and there are some key elements here that tell us about who this artist is, for example, the clothing he is wearing is the official clothing of the Academy of Art in France, for which he worked at as a professor. There is artwork in front of him, and he sort of holds a portfolio of what he looks like, or what looks like sketches to me. He also holds his arm out as if he's sort of welcoming you into the scene, or maybe he's sort of presenting himself to the viewer. Sharing a work of art like this can be a good start of a discussion with your students and maybe get their juices flowing and get them inspired. Another example is this self-portrait by Francesco Paolo Michetti. This one maybe tells us about the artist's style with the way the pastels are used and to create this sort of textural background. For me, this one is more like a sketch-like feel and perhaps may evoke the feelings of the artist rather than necessarily giving us objects to pull information from. We may infer characteristics of the identity of the artist based on the way the materials are handled for this one. You can also start digging into what students might include in a self-portrait. This photograph I have shown here is by Hippolyte Bayard. Bayard did a series of self-portraits that included an elaborate collection of objects that he loved. One of his passions was for plants, and he came from a long line of gardeners in his family. And so he planned this whole scene and included, what clothing he was going to wear, what hat he was going to wear, where things were placed. So your students can use this and sort of start thinking about, like, maybe I'll make a list of what I want to include, much like Bayard did for this self-portrait. And then for step 2, we can start brainstorming with students. So students can use this chart to write words or phrases that describe aspects of their identity. This handout is actually part of those unshuttered lesson plans that were shared earlier, and it is designed for students to write their name in the circle in the center and then write aspects of their identity that they feel are seen by others, and then other aspects that they see in themselves. So there might be some overlap, like maybe you see yourself in the same way you think others see you, but thinking about how you see yourself versus how others see you can uncover strategies of how to communicate your identity to others, and that can become helpful in this process. For step 3, it's time to choose the strategy, as in what type of medium or materials or processes would you like to use in your classroom. So you may have constraints. You may want to pick a strategy that works best for your students or your location. So I'm going to share a few ideas of what you might do depending on your situation. The first strategy is to keep it simple. We do this a lot in the museum since we are unable to use a lot of messy materials in the galleries. I suspect some of you may have the same constraints. If I had to put money on it, some of you may want to keep it simple. So using simple drawing materials and paper can still be a great way for students to express themselves through portraiture. So here is an example of a self-portrait drawing by a student who seems really confident to me. They're holding the world over their head. Even with simple materials like pencil and paper, we still got a lot of information about who this student is and what they want to say or share with us. Another idea is to use an assortment of materials to define the details that you want to share about yourself. So what you could have students do is trace their profile on paper, and then they can cut those out using using scissors, and then use markers, pencils, or other drawing materials to fill the inside and the outside of their outline. And they could take those words that they used or phrases that they use from the identity chart and add those to the inside and outside of their profile. So you could make this into a collage assignment, or, if you have old magazines, or even, mixed media materials like buttons or string or anything like that, if you wanted to use that. Another strategy is using photography to make self-portraits. So if you have access to a camera, which some of you do, you could have students work individually, in pairs, or in small groups to capture themselves in a number of ways. Close-up portraits could be a fun place to start, since it's just focused in one place. So here are a few short videos from that YouTube page that we shared earlier that you could share with your students to get them started. And this is close-up and extreme close-ups. And I'm going to turn it down because I don't want any of you to go deaf. And then what I really like about these videos is that they are very simple. There's a couple of steps. They're easily digestible, and you could share these and then just have students go wild if you wanted to with experimenting. And then I have this next one. So that's just another example of one that you could share. And then the piece you see here on this slide is a work by a student who used these skills that they learned in these videos. So you could also do self-portraits with an untraditional point of view. So here we have an example from a student using dramatic angles to share his love of basketball. I was trying to imagine this student creating this photograph, and I figured there'd probably be a lot of planning involved to get this particular point of view. The composition is actually really impressive, and the choice to capture the feet that actually run the plays when they're playing basketball, I have a feeling that there is a connection there, and that could possibly have been planned. And then I also want to share a couple of videos that support that student's approach. And then this next one is a little bit different. So something I really like about those videos is, one, it encourages students to take a plethora of photos, and then it also makes some analogies, like look at the world like a bird does. And I think that that really makes art making digestible for people who are just starting out. Okay, so another prompt I'm going to go into is sharing something you believe in. So for this one, we can start the discussion about how art can actually communicate beliefs and values using works of art to facilitate that discussion. The work of art here is a part of a series by Lewis Hine, who lived in New York in the early 20th century. And he wanted to show things that had to be corrected, quote unquote. and wanted to document the problems of child labor in various areas of society. So here we see a young girl at a cotton mill. This is one of many photographs showing children in labor-intensive settings, and his goal was to use photography to document what was going on in his community. So this concept was sort of new at the time, and using photography for social action was a way to communicate a problematic situation, in this case, child labor in our society. So this could be a good start to a discussion with your students about how art can communicate values and beliefs to others. And then once you discuss how art can communicate values and beliefs to others, you can move into decoding a message in a work of art. So this work of art here was created by Laura Aguilar. This was a part of Aguilar's Will Work For series. Aguilar was a photo-based artist who focused her work on the body as a metaphor for identity, sexuality, and gender. So she challenged concepts of beauty, specifically in Latina, lesbian, and Black communities, and through the lenses of disability and obesity. So born and raised in East Los Angeles, Aguilar was the daughter of an immigrant Mexican father and a Mexican-American mother. And in this work of art, Aguilar uses cardboard and marker to contemplate the nature of success, referencing simple ideas like opportunity and access. You can see there that those are defined on those cardboard pieces that she's holding. And this cardboard, this act of holding the signs is in the way that people often stand on the street and look for work. And Aguilar felt that access and opportunity were being withheld from people in her community. And so she's really challenging the viewer to connect to the realities of seeing people in need with future opportunities for successful outcomes in her community. So I'm sure that your students will also have ideas and reactions to this work. And you could open up the conversation about how Aguilar created this and what went into planning this work. And then in step 3 is where you have students craft their message. So you could have them journal about it. Maybe they have an issue that's really important to them. You know, how would they like to help make the world a better place? And what message would they like to share? And then for step 4, you can decide a making strategy. So I will be sharing a drawing and a photograph, but you could also use any of the other techniques that I've shared previously, like a pencil and paper, if that's something that you prefer. So here is a drawing by a student who wanted to communicate very strong feelings about a certain politician. We see the details in this drawing include the American flag, a figure with an orangish blonde hair, wearing a blue suit with a red tie. This figure also has fire and flames around the head. Down to the bottom, you can see the Spanish words El Diablo, which translates to the devil in English. From this work, we can tell that they have really strong feelings about this figure, and discussing the work with the student to uncover the reasoning behind their decisions can be a great way to discover how communicating ideas through visual art can be a powerful tool. You can also use photography. So here is a photograph by a group of young student artists. We see there have been some specific choices made, like how the color of the background matches the color of the text on this young girl's shirt, the facial expression that was intentionally captured, and the position of the body. So your students will definitely have some ideas about what these artists were trying to communicate. And you could have students work in groups to interpret this image or create the image, whatever works well for your classroom. And then finally, the last prompt that I'm going to go over is telling a story. So for this example, we're going to focus on telling a story about someone in your community as a way to express yourself with art. So here is another work by Lewis Hine documenting child workers in New York in the early 1900s. And this one is of a newsboy and captures a lot of details about this very young person working at the time. So you could have a conversation about who this person is, how the artist is representing this person from the community, and what clues there are to support their claims. You could also have a conversation about how this newsboy is being depicted. How do we think that he feels? How old is he? What would working as a newsboy look like? Like, what would the day-to-day look like for this boy? And then you could also discuss the photograph that Jeremy Davis shared with us earlier. This work came out of a series that he did with Unshuttered, where he documented the day in the life at a barbershop in his community. And this image is a wonderful example of an artist using art to communicate feelings of people in a connected community. The way that the elements are put together in this image shows how an artist can really tell a story through photography. And the next step is to explore different visual narratives. So you could have an image scavenger hunt, if you will, where students find different images that accomplish different goals. So you could have students work in groups or individually to find an image that advertises, shows something otherwise or often unseen or overlooked, spotlights an aspect of history or humanity, influences a choice or belief, explores a place, or maybe establishes or complicates a memory. And I think this exercise will further develop student skills in interpreting a number of different images to help them later create their own. And then this worksheet, which is in the Unshuttered lesson plans, is if students are looking at a photograph or any work of art, they can start interpreting it in under the lens of a narrative. So for example, if we're looking at the photograph of a newsboy, you could go through and identify the people, the places, the settings, the details, the main ideas, and then even the theme for that photo. So students could use this to interpret images, but then they could also use this same worksheet to then plan their work down the road. And then once students decipher a few works of art, they can start brainstorming about members of their community and the stories that they tell. They can select a story and use mind mapping to identify details and plan out the project. They can pick out the details from mind mapping to help tell that story. And I have this handout also that is in the Unshuttered materials, and it can be used with students to work through the details of their ideas. So they can choose an area of their community that they want to share and then break that down into major elements and then details to connect to that main idea. And then you would go back to the planning stage and pick out what details that you should include to tell the story in your own work. And then step 4 is to choose an approach to use. So I have some ideas here. We've already talked about drawing and painting. So now I'm going to go deeper into the next 2, which is curating and using photography with different skills than what we've already seen. So another way to use self-expression to tell stories is through curation. So here at the museum, we definitely see collecting images to tell a story is a kind of art form. And so your students could also do this to express their ideas. So here's an example of me putting together a set of images to tell the story of child labor. So it's 3 of Lewis Hine's photos, 2 we've already talked about, but then I've also included this 3rd one showing an 11-year-old peanut vendor in Delaware. So you could have students work in groups or individually for this project, and it could be entirely digital if you're able to do that, or maybe you could print out images if that's available to you, and maybe even have a gallery show that's curating a group of images that tell a story about something in your community. You could also have students do what Lewis Hine and Jeremy Davis did and capture a person in their community using photography. So here is a student image capturing a fruit cart vendor from their neighborhood, and it's this action shot of what looks like a transaction happening. And I also have a skills video that you could share with students that really focuses on environmental portraits. So that might be a good one. You could even share for any of the other prompt with self to share yourself if you wanted to. But you could also use that same skill for someone in your community. And then, and finally, I just shared ways to tell a story about someone in your community, but you could also tell a story about someone in your class or someone in your family. So this photograph here depicts a woman seemingly very important to this young student. So you can see they included some light effects with graphic imagery shining onto the figure. You can also tell by this image that a lot of care went into the position of the figure, and I would think that the student would have a really great story to share about the process of planning this photograph. So you could also include building the step of sharing into the project as part of a debrief. And finally, here is an example of a student telling a story about another student in their class. So you can see the rainbow face paint of an individual sitting on what looks like a picnic table. And the title of this image is called Coming Out. The student has communicated a story about this student through details and choices. To me, the choice, whether intentional or unintentional, to not show the full face while using the title Coming Out, which implies showing your true self to the world, speaks to the complex narrative of coming out in this student's school community. All right, so that concludes my presentation. I think now we're going to go into the Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you, Darcy, so much for those fantastic resources that you provided and really helpful tips to be used in the classroom. Having been a former classroom teacher myself, like your presentation was really helpful. So I hope everyone can take something away from that. And as well from Brittany and Rebecca and Jeremy, I'd love to invite you all to join us for any question and answer that we might have from our participants and from our audience. So I'm going to look down at the Q&A, but while I'm looking for Q&A, I would love to ask Mr. Davis how he has been progressing since the original Unshuttered photography in 2019 when he joined the Getty, and what changes he might have made to his practice, changes to your technique, how you approach photography now. Why don't you give us an update of how things are going?
Thank you, Keisha. Yeah, so for me, since Getty Unshuttered, I've progressed my photography practice by really implementing photography with different mediums. So originally, when I was in Unshuttered, I primarily did digital photography. But now, since I got to USC, I've now been implementing some I stayed more on the digital side, but now I've learned how to edit and do a lot of new things in the post photography process. So that's where I've been kind of with my photography, and then outside of photography, I actually started picking up. Okay. I was just reading the question. Sorry about that. But outside of photography, I picked up some film. So I actually added a major this past semester at USC. So there's cinema and media studies. So now I'm taking classes in the film school where we watch like numerous films. Then we have to analyze them, write a bunch of different like essays on different aspects, like from lighting and the camera movement, to like main characters, and just like breaking down the history of film, as well as like getting hands-on experience with like the newest like equipment at USC.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Oh my goodness. And I had no idea that you were also pursuing film at the same time. So you will remember us hopefully when you're on stage one day. Winning. Okay. Well, we're so glad to have you with us. Thank you for sharing and giving us a little bit of an update. I do have a question here that I think we could direct towards Darcy. Darcy, there's a question from a participant that says, how can we get students to think individually and not use cliche? And then maybe I'd like to throw that over to Jeremy to answer as well after Darcy has a crack at it.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I understand what cliche means, but I think working individually, I think you could design, I mean, obviously knowing your students will help, and building relationships with them and sort of figuring out what makes them tick. So I know, like, if I have a student that's sort of apprehensive to work alone and is really sort of copying or emulating other students, I really try to sort of zone in on that particular student and really figure out like what makes them tick. It sounds like Jeremy had a similar situation where a teacher was like really getting him to think about photography in a different way, really put attention into him. So, I think for me, I would try to really challenge, like individualize the experience somehow for that particular student. If it's just rampant and all students are really trying to emulate each other, celebrate that and figure out a way to make that okay, and they'll all break off eventually.
How about you, Jeremy? Do you have any updates to that? I mean, I know it's so hard when we live in this day and age of Instagram and TikTok, and everyone really is all about copying each other and emulating what they see someone else do. So how do you break past that in your own creative, practice? How do you break past just copying what's popular?
Right. I would say for me, and just like for students in general, like to prevent like creating art that comes off as like cliche. What I do is just like create like art that's whatever speaking to me, and like whatever I'm feeling like touches me the most at the moment. So I think that's like it's I don't know, it's like very general, and like I don't know, it seems general, like an easy thing to say, but yeah, I always just say like create like art for yourself and not for other people, and also to like when you're looking at other people's art, use it as inspiration instead of I see they did this, let me go do it because I think it's cool, or I think that's like the right way, because like there's no like one way to like do art. You could always like spin something and put your own twist on it. So really just use like other people's art as inspiration. And I think that's also like a big part of being an artist, because like as an artist, you're always gonna have to look to like people who came before you and study the greats of like photography or like film or like whatever, like not just in art but just like like any profession you do, you have to like study before.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your inspiration with all of us, and with in turn letting teachers around the country be able to leverage some of the photography that you shared with Getty Unshuttered. We have been so grateful for having your passion and having your artwork, and think that this is really beneficial to teachers and to students alike. And so students are continuing to be an inspiration for Unshuttered. Unshuttered continues to evolve and grow as a program, and we've been very happy in the Museum Education Department to work on this project, and hope that everyone who came to today's webinar can find find something valuable. It's such a multifaceted program. There's so many different layers to it, from direct participation to resources that are available. So in the interest of time, I know we're coming to the close here, and I don't see any additional questions down in the chat or Q&A. So I'm going to wrap up today's webinar and thank everyone for attending. We very much hope that you enjoyed it. Until the next time, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed us. Take care. Have a good night.